Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode of the Road to FIDE Master series. This is the episode number 58 in which I will cover the analysis of the round number 7 from Kielce Chess Open. And the pairings, yet again, I know I complain a lot, were not so great for me because for the third time in a row I was playing a junior player, lower rated than myself, but as you can tell this time even bigger problem because it was a FIDE master. So I was playing an Indian guy, Apar Saxena, and if you remember from the round number 3, I also played an Indian guy who had an amazing story in terms of the rating change because as you may remember at the age of 21 he gained 500 rating points, which was amazing. And in here it was no different in terms of how much rating my opponent gained. Thankfully though he was a little bit younger, so I can explain it as a, easier achievable success to gain rating when you are younger because the K factor is bigger. However, what was not so great was the fact that only half a year ago my opponent was rated nearly 2400. I will show you his rating chart. As you can tell, at the age of 10 in the 2023 he was rated just above 1900. From that point onwards he gained those nearly 500 rating points to get himself at 2300 rating, but within last half a year he lost 300 rating points. So once more I am playing a lower rated opponent who has a past of having much higher rating than myself. So should I approach it as a better player, as a worse player? I don't know. What I knew is that I yet again get black pieces to face such challenge, and I knew it will not be easy. For another time in this tournament, Indian guy surprised me. In here, in this game, even though I was playing junior player, he opted for a knight f3 with b3 setup, so kind of a surprise. I did not see knight f3 coming really. I've played really everything against this move. Funnily enough, after this Kielce Chess Open, I've played in a Blitz tournament in which 3 or 4 players played this knight f3 b3 line against me, and against all 3 of them, and in this game too, I chose completely different setup. In here I chose e6 as my first move, trying to transpose into some Queen's Gambit decline stuff, which I was mostly preparing for this game. But my opponent after b3 showed me that he's in no fight, let's say opening wise, he just wants to play a game. I like it too, but at this point I decided to change things up a little bit, and I opted for the c5 move. I'm not sure if this setup is the best in terms of the move order, but trying to get him out of the comfort zone a little bit. After his bishop b2, I developed the knight to f6, nothing crazy, c4, knight c6, and in here my opponent opted for the doubled fianchetto setup. I was trying to get him into this setup because if I have played, let's say, move like d5 earlier, I would believe that he would like to play more of a e3 stuff, but since I was delaying d5 so much, I was waiting, and after g3 only now I have played d5. It's not that it's a better combination for me, let's say, of the moves, because, for example, after takes bishop g2, bishop likes attacking this pawn a lot, and if my opponent will manage to play d4, exchange the pawns, create an isolani one for me, sometimes I might face some problems. Nevertheless, as you may know from my previous videos, I like the isolani pawn structure, and on top of that, I knew that somewhere around here I might have a additional opportunity because I felt like d4 might be a good option. I was thinking about it for quite some time. However, I was unsure about it, and the problem with that move is that it's very responsible, right? Because pushing the pawn like that would guarantee me some more space, would block this bishop, gain me the d5 square, right? However, at the same time, the pawn might be attacked, so I need to be very cautious about it. And not only that, by pushing the d pawn, I am leaving the c pawn behind. So sometimes on this semi-open file, I might face some difficulties. So even though intuitively I felt like it would be a good choice, I decided to stick to my original plan, which was to play with isolani pawn. So I decided to, instead of developing the king side, which would be natural, I decided to start with the queen side. So I played bishop e6, and after castle I played rook c8, and the whole idea behind it was that maybe I will be able to get my bishop into play with not losing a tempo. What do I mean by that is that usually, for example, if I play bishop e7 as of now, after d4, if I take, my bishop is on e7. I would rather have it on c5, to be honest. And also, if I am not taking my opponent on d4, he might do so on c5, and now I've wasted this one tempo for the bishop, and I wanted to avoid that, so that, as I've said, I developed the queen side first. So after bishop e6, castle, rook c8, d4, I was not on time to, be taken and then take back with the bishop, because my opponent also delayed d4. But I took, and now I've played bishop c5, so kind of what I wanted. What are the drawbacks to it? First of all, I have not castled yet. Thankfully, though, it should not be that big of a deal. The other problem is that I'm inviting my opponent to take the bishop on e6 and get the bishop pair advantage. At the same time, though, transposing the position into the structure without the isolani pawn. So yeah, I was, having some tricks under my sleeve trying to get my opponent out of the comfort zone, but was it objectively a good choice? I'm not that sure. Nevertheless, this is what I've played for, so I cannot complain when my bishop is taken. After knight e6 fe, knight c3 castle, my opponent chose e4, which I believed to be a critical line. In here, I had also a critical choice. So my problem in general with playing in the tournament is that sometimes I get frustrated with the things that I cannot control, just like the pairings that I am complaining all the time about. So facing third time in a row such a young, good player is never easy, also mentally, I would say. So thanks to the fact that I had a higher rating, I felt like if I will take on e4, this would mean effectively like a draw offer, with admitting that, okay, white is better. What do I mean is, in this variation, most likely the variation that would occur would be something like this, or I can maybe take on e4 first so that I am avoiding taking on f6, so maybe something like this. So in here, obviously I have no chance to be better because opponent has a bishop pair and I have a weakness. At the same time, it should be defendable position for me. So this is what I mean when I say effectively a draw offer. I would exchange everything, claim that I have no winning chances whatsoever, but I would say, okay, my opponent, you don't have those two, let's agree for a draw. So I was debating with myself, okay, should I take it or not? Because the problem is that I underestimated e4 move overall from the distance, and the d4 approach that I initially wanted to play seemed much more riskier the longer I thought about it, because the problem is that after d4 move, yes, I am closing this bishop, yes, I am kind of closing this one too, so it seems fair, but after knight a4, I am hit there, I am hit there, some e5 moves are coming with the problems on the long diagonal. So tactically speaking, I am not that great in here, unfortunately. Nevertheless, I decided to take this aggressive approach, let's say. I was calculating in here like really 4 different moves. Also queen e7 maybe came across my mind. So in the end, I stuck with my original idea, which was to play bishop e7, also the most natural looking move. The idea behind it was that yes, I saw e5 move, and yes, I saw the consequences if I take, because apparently if I take, and I play a move like, I don't know, this, my opponent just goes back. All of a sudden my pieces are completely misplaced, not coordinated, this pawn is basically falling, so I'm having an open position without a pawn, with opponent having the bishop pair, like in here I'm collapsing sooner or later. So since that was the problem, I even thought about playing a move like knight d5 at this point, so that if my opponent accepts the exchange, I can, give a check in between, and if he goes like away from the check, I can take the bishop, and all of a sudden I am the one creating some threats. So there was also the crazy line in which he can sack with the queen and then take here, and then it was really unclear who is better there. And the problem was though that after knight d5 he really does not have to take on c8. He can play a move like f4, hitting away my knight, and it's not really the problem that the knight is hit, let's say. The problem is that the f5 was closed, taking away the f3 square from me, and it was my entry point, let's say, to the game. And my rook is also under the attack still, so my only way of playing in here would be to deliver the fork, but my opponent takes the pawn, attack the knight, keeps pressure in here. So after plenty more of, let's say, exchanges and takings, I would be still falling short in terms of the material. So it was not playable, unfortunately, for me, but I was, let's say, at least thinking about sacrifice. So going back to the game after this e5 move, I had to decide, obviously beforehand, what will I do at this point, and I decided that I will play knight d5, centralizing the knight, claiming that, okay, you can get this pawn, but in exchange, I would like to get some initiative going, some counterplay. So the idea behind this move was that initially I was thinking mostly about knight b2, and I didn't see knight c3 coming, so knight b2 was my main move, after which I had some thoughts about taking on d4, and after queen d4 having knight f4 move, so that if my opponent exchanges the queens, I have knight e2 in between one, king h1, rook f2 d8, and yes, I am playing without a f-pawn, but I am having control over the open files. This knight might be having some difficulties in entering the game thanks to the fact that I take away his squares, and also bishop a3 is in the air. So this was the variation that I was initially covering, let's say, and thinking, okay, this might be good. The problem with this one though is that after knight f4 trade was not forced. So for example, move like queen e4 would be an annoying one because I don't have this check, I cannot exchange the queens. And okay, I can exchange the bishop, but that was not the point overall of my tries. And also the knight has a very nice escape route to the f4 active square. So I was not too happy about it, but thankfully after after knight b2, then I found that okay, maybe I can switch my move order and play bishop a3 first, because now knight d3 does not exist because the bishop will be hanging, and if so, I corrected the positioning of one of my pieces, and opponent does not have such opportunity. So after a move like he would play, I don't know what exactly, some move, let's say, then I would go for this knight d4, knight f4, knight e2 continuation, so that I have this bishop a3 included, even more powerful variations. So I was more than happy with that. But then, as I've said, when I was checking the variations all the time, I saw the knight c3 move, which initially, looks like it's blundering the piece because I can, remove the defender. If opponent takes, I can take, and I have one more knight. However, there is one more in between move of knight takes d5, and if I take, I will be taken. If I will not take, my opponent will also go away with the knight and claim the pawn advantage anyway. So yeah, in here I was not sure if my counterplay will be sufficient, let's say, but still I decided, okay, let's try bishop c5. If my opponent goes away with the knight somewhere, I believe I was mostly considering knight e3, so that the knight is closing down this diagonal and the pressure to the f2 square. I thought to myself, okay, I will move the queen like somewhere on the dark squares. I will try to maintain some initiative. However, a b4 move occurred on the board that from the distance I did not see. Only after the variation has started to play out, I spotted that this is the other choice of my opponent that he could be tempted by. The idea behind it is that since my knight is supposed to be so powerful there, solidified by all the pieces that goes on the black squares, my opponent is willing to play b4, forcing me to go back and then trading the bishop, so that this knight will not be so good anymore because it will be removed defender of it, right? However, the more I looked at this position when it occurred on the board, I felt like it's not that bad for me. Indeed, I can have this counterplay that I was hoping for, thanks to the fact that I have not only an amazing outpost for the knight on d4, but also the c4 square for the rook looks pretty amazing. I can attack the pawn. With the rook on c4, I would be perhaps forcing my opponent to play a3. Then I might have some knight c2 ideas with forking the rook and the pawn. On top of that, rook c4 might come in handy in terms of double stacking my rooks along the c-file and creating some counterplay there. On top of that, this pawn is over pushed in a sense, because yes, it guarantees my opponent some space. At the same time, it will require some defensive resources, and for example f4, which would be looking natural, seems very, very risky. So all in all, I felt okay. I am a pawn down, but I have a game. So this is the decision I've made, as you may remember, on the move number 13. So I was proud of myself that even though I lost a pawn in the process, I am maintaining some winning chances by not, let's say, virtually offering a draw. So that was that, and at this point it was the end of my, let's say, variation that I have calculated from the distance. It was not the time though to chill out because I was very low on time because of all the time I burned to achieve this position. My opponent played bishop e4. That was somewhat expected. You know, as I've said, c4 might be a good outpost for me, so trying to reroute the bishop there or claim some attack on the king side was natural. Nevertheless, I chose this rook c4 idea, after which I expected mostly a3, because as you remember, I told you guys that knight c2 is incoming. With the bishop on e4, it's no longer possible, so a3 as of now would look more than natural. After this move, I was considering queen c7, attacking the pawn, kind of forcing my opponent to play f4, and then I would be willing to go back with the queen, trying to make something happen along the diagonal. So this was my choice. Maybe also this was something that my opponent did not like, and he chose queen h5 idea, which I felt is simply a mistake because it's not working tactically. Yes, you know, checkmate is incoming, but I can stop it very easily with the g6 move. And the idea is that my opponent might try to sack the bishop and then claim the perpetual. So if he thought that I would be happy with a draw, maybe he was happy with a draw anyway too, and he wanted to do just that. The problem is that after g6, bishop takes g6, I have a move that will guarantee myself a piece advantage. What is it? As you know, whenever there is a fianchettoed bishop, it is a very, very important defender of a king. Without it, he just went to g6, the king is vulnerable. And I can make use of that by giving a check on f3. And whenever the king goes here or there, I have queen b7 move. King h1, by the way, was an inaccuracy by my opponent. It makes no difference whether it's on the g2 or the h1 squares. On both of those squares, king is very, very weak. Knight h4 ideas, let's say a3 was played. Knight h4 ideas might be the best ones, but not because I will checkmate my opponent in here, but because I will take the bishop on g6. So this is the problem. After queen b7, I have all the checks that will attack the bishop. So after bishop d3, I will take here and then claim the bishop. After bishop b1, which would be the funny way actually to go about the position, I will not take the bishop, that's true, but I will claim the pawn. If pawn tries to cover the check, I will take it once more, and I will then try to give yet another discovered check. So all in all, I would be winning anyway, and this is what my opponent have missed probably. So at this point, he just has to sacrifice the bishop on h7. So bishop h7 takes, and as you can tell, this king does nothing here. It would be much better on g2 square, solidifying the f2 pawn and all that. So yeah, thanks to the wrong, let's say, calculation of my opponent and then inaccuracy of king h1, I got myself a position that should be winning. It will not be easy though, because as you can tell, I have the knight advantage, but for the free pawns, so the game is for sure still on. My opponent though, perhaps he wanted to put me into pressure because of my time. This is move number 26, and I had I don't know, like 15 minutes maybe. And instead of thinking really like how should he approach this position and fight for the drawing chances, he just went for a4, which when you look at it, let's say from the surface, it's very nice choice, right? Since what white should do in order to obtain a draw chances, he should try to remove as many pawns from the board as possible. So a4 is an attempt to exchange, but it comes at a cost of losing the f2 pawn. I can simply play knight d2, hitting the rook. If rook goes away, I take the pawn. And it's not really about the pawn simply because in no time after rook a2, pinning my knight, rook d4, ab5, my opponent is regaining the pawn that he has just lost. The problem is though that this pawn was much more important than this one, because it's on the f file near the king on the second rank, right? So it allows my rooks and knights to enter the game. So it's much easier for me to navigate this position, even though, as you can tell, I'm kind of pinned and I'm under pressure. In here, calm king g6 moves does the job for me, because the idea is that if my opponent takes on a7, I have knight f3, and even if the rook would be hanging, I would not care because I have beautiful rook h2 checkmate. And if so, the rook is unable to take the pawn, and my opponent has to think of some other way to deal with the situation. And only now he fought for a pretty long time how to continue, because even if he does nothing, like I don't know, maybe b6, right? I still maintain those knight f3 possibilities, because if he takes there, I cannot checkmate him because the rook protects, but I would be taking the rook, and then thanks to this threat I am winning the game anyway in the short notice, let's say. But if he takes me the other way around, it may be not so simple, also because of the fact that those pawns are looking at each other. So b6 was just an exemplary move. It does not mean anything. My point is that knight f3 is still in the air, and for that reason my opponent chose a rook e1 move. Kind of an interesting one, because it gives me the opportunity to take either of the pawns that I would like to. So I can take on b4, just like that, because since the rook went away from attacking the knight, my rook can go away from protecting it. And also I have the possibility of rook takes h2, king h1, h2, and some fork, you know, like he would go perhaps maybe here, and then the idea is, okay, do I like this position or not? So I was not so happy with it, because I am leaving this b5 pawn for the opponent behind. So I would have to, you know, be very sure that I will be taking it. From the distance, I was not. So I decided that I would rather take on b4 and then, you know, maintain those possibilities. So for example, if my opponent does once more nothing, I now can take, here, and at the end of the variation, thanks to the fact that I took the pawn previously, I will be having the rook b5 point at the end, and this position should be much easier winning. So after rook takes b4, obviously my opponent will do some move, and he chose h4 just to run away from this trick with the fork. At this point I had to figure out, okay, how do I want to approach this? So my general idea was that I wanted to get rid of this b pawn if I was to lose, let's say, the a pawn. So I found this idea of playing knight e4, suggesting a rook trade, and funnily enough, this might be a tempting option for my opponent to undermine my rook, so that if I take, he takes, but since he left the first rank, I can actually checkmate him. Very funny stuff. So after knight e4, he has to take, he goes away with the king somewhere, he chose g2, I just jump back, I create somewhat of a checkmate pattern sometimes, and I will take this pawn, I will maintain the pressure to this one, so I was happy with this exact scenario. After rook a1, I checked on b2, so that if, for example, king h3 happens, I have king h5, and the checkmate is incoming, so I am easily winning. There are some Zugzwang scenarios in which my opponent has no good move in here. He would have to sacrifice the pawn, then move the rook, and then the checkmate is incoming. So this is what I was hoping for, but after rook b2, my opponent just shook his head and realized that he cannot go either this way or this way too, actually, because I have king f5 with rook f2 threat, similar stuff. So yeah, he has to go down, and after the king is, you know, cut away, I can now take the b5 pawn. After rook a7, I have a choice of how to take the pawn. And this is where the things got messy, if you will believe it or not, because I have a clear winning position. But I have to be somewhat precise, because as you can tell, if we would have left only rook and the knight against the rook on the board, it would be theoretical draw. So this is my biggest treasure in the position. I have to look after it, and I have to know how to use it in order to win the game. So I should think about this exact thing, like how to win the game at this very moment, because, you know, I can take this pawn with the rook, with the knight, maybe my king can try to do it. Maybe instead of taking the pawn immediately, I should think about cutting away the white king and so on. So plenty of choices, and similarly to the game number 5, which I've lost, as you may remember, it was the In here, this is the move number 37. Then it was like 38, and I had the opportunity to take the pawn with the rook, with the knight, or do anything else. And very similar scenario, also with the time troubles. I was not sure how to approach it, and in the end, I very, very much dislike my approach because I took with the knight, taking away the knight from kind of a good outpost, right? And then I decided to, instead of keep the rook active and cut away the king, to bring it around to like e-file. So I gave a check, played rook e2, and some rook e3. And why was that? As of now, I cannot even recall what was the idea behind it. Yeah, I just can't. So the problem is that as of now, my pieces look a little bit uncoordinated. And this is the problem that occurred after I took with the knight. If, for example, I would decide, okay, I want to take with the king, let's advance with the king, let's push it further, gave a check, I would go for activity, I would not go for this, slow win, because the position will win anyway itself. It would be much better. And here I felt, okay, it's winning, so I don't have to do much, but it was a very bad approach. Why? After king g2, I mean, what moves do I have that are, making my position better? My knight cannot go back, is not willing to go there for sure. Um, from there to there to attack the pawn, it would take me like 3 more moves to maneuver around, so quite a lot. My king cannot really enter the game because it's checked and I have to go back. So like I don't have any move. So I've decided that I will try to change things a little bit, and I've played knight d3 so that king is cut away and my pieces cannot be attacked. Also, I am taking away the f4 square so that maybe my king will be able to advance, and if my opponent will play g4, which he did, I will play e5. Because after knight d3 5, I am more than happy to claim that f4 square is mine, and I will be checking there, and finally my knight will be much more active than on e5, and I should be getting initiative. However, only after I play this, I realized that I might not be able to win this game. And this is why, guys, you should not rely on the computer evaluation all the time, especially in the endgame, because as you can tell, eval bar has not moved. Like, I am still winning. But from the human perspective, it's not that easy. What am I talking about? Well, the problem is that with the e5 move, I took away the route for my king, and those pawns are closing the fifth rank, so basically all of those squares are taken, and my opponent can start checking me. So he can give a check, and after I go down, he can give a check. After I go up, he can give a check. And the idea is that I would be really happy to keep my king on the king side, for example, at this square, so that, when the check is incoming, I can cover, I can take the pawns and all that. But in here, the geometry is so funny that I cannot do it. Look at this, king d5, rook a5, king e4, rook a4. I cannot go here, I cannot go here. All of those are taken. I have to go back. So the only choice for me in order to try to win the game would be to either put my knight to like c5 square, which as you can tell, eval bar is dropping because the knight was supposed to be in here, not there, completely out of play. The pawns are just simply pushing. I am pinned, I am not active, I am not coordinated. I am the one that has to be worried about the pawn being pushed, like g5, rook e4, king h3, here, this is the computer suggestion. Like, am I happy with the situation as of now? I don't think so. So knight c5 would be out of question, and as I've said, after I played e5, I saw this line, so I knew that perhaps I would have to go there and maybe even further to like b file, but look at this, my king was there. Now it's like 4 lines away. Yet again, my opponent can just simply try to start pushing the pawns. And am I winning? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe not. Knight f4 will be probably the way to go. King f2 to not give me the king h2, rook g h3 with a tempo. And I have to go away with the rook. And as you can tell, the king attacks the rook attacks the pawn. The pawn is no longer protected because both the knight and the king went away. So the only trick that I have, and thankfully I am still having this winning position, is the fact that after my rook goes away, the pawn cannot be taken because of the fork. So this is the one and only trick that gives me this winning position, and I saw this from the distance. But then I thought, okay, what about king f1? And from the distance, I did not have a solution. Apparently, I just have to, keep bluffing and go for the e4 and, advancing my pawn and not care about this one. But is it humanly that easy? I'm not so sure. I was really worried that with a knight advantage, I would be having such a nightmare in which I would have to calculate and be worried and all that. And yeah, I was so unhappy, so unhappy. Thankfully, thankfully, my opponent stopped checking me at this point. He did not continue with this and that. He just played h4, which I find amusing. This is such a bad move. I mean, I cannot even explain it. It gives me this g5 square again for my king. So I can give a check with the knight, solidifying this knight on the very good square. After king f2, I played rook h3, stopping the h pawn from coming. G pawn also is stopped because it cannot move since it has to protect the pawn. And yeah, from this point onwards, it's all very easy for me, even though eval bar shows the very same evaluation. So as I've said, don't get tricked by the eval bar in the endgame, guys, because accuracy wise, if I will pull up the review, I would say that I will not have any inaccuracies probably in this endgame, but from the human standpoint, I played it terribly. Okay, anyway, why is it easy from now on? Because the king is cut away, all of my pieces are, protecting each other, pawns are stopped, I have an easy route to them. So after rook a4, king f6, rook e4, hitting my pawn, I can just simply try to, reroute my pieces in this way or the other. I chose knight e6, king g2 was played, rook a3, rook b4, went away from attacking my pawn so that I can go back with the knight, give a check, because after king f2 is played, there is a fork, so yet another fork incoming, so that's why rook c4 was better, by the way. So a rook b4, check, king f2 is not possible, after king h2 I can give a check, this square is taken, so opponent has to go down, rook g3, I take this pawn, I take the other very shortly, and at this point I believe my opponent should have resigned, and he didn't. So maybe it was about the fact that I was playing this endgame so badly that he wanted to test me out even in this position in which I'm clearly and easily winning. So yeah, my opponent just played out some moves, not even like fighting, just playing out until the end. But obviously at the very end, at this point he resigned, one move before the checkmate. So yeah, thank you for being in here with me until the end for this, I believe, longest analysis of the tournament. If you enjoyed the video, enjoyed all the tricks and antics and my approach, please remember to leave a like. And with that, I will see you tomorrow for the next analysis. Thank you all for watching this one. Bye bye.